Take each game and its merits there.
Hello and welcome to our latest episode, the last of the trilogy of games against Belgium that Ireland played in the late 20s and early 30s. This is each game on its merits, where we go through every single Irish soccer international ever played from 1924 to today. And we have gone through the Olympic side of 1924, the two friendlies against Italy, 1926 and 1927, and this is the third game we played against Belgium in 1930. So my name is Eibhilin O'Reardon and I'm joined as ever.
Hello, I'm Jerry Farrell.
Jerry Farrell, our resident football historian. So Jerry, this is the third game against Belgium again. This Irish team, this FAI team, only playing about one game a year. The IFA Ireland team are playing the home championships. So we get to play, as the IFA are reputed to have said, Catholic countries. And so this game in Brussels is a 3-1 win for Ireland, and we're going to talk mainly today about Jimmy Dunne. This is the Jimmy Dunne episode.
Yes.
This is the Jimmy Dunne episode, ladies and gentlemen. This is where he makes his big entry into our lives. So I will talk first of all about the match report again from Donald Cullen's book. Right, so we basically only really play against Belgium. There is actually this accusation which we are offended by from the IFA is probably accurate, because between Spain, Belgium and Italy, it's pretty much all we play against in these years anyway. So 1930, 3-1 win for Ireland. Jimmy Dunne scores twice. So the bad weather and poor finishing again disrupted the Belgians, although they took an early lead when Bastien scored with a hooked shot. What's a hooked shot, I wonder? Kind of a arching effort. 12 minutes later, Jimmy Dunne equalised for the Irish and left the scores even at the break. A fair reflection of the play. The Irish were more dominant in the second half and won the game with goals from Dunne and Flood. So the team, Tom Farquharson from Cardiff, we've spoken about him in the last episode, ex-IRA man, Cardiff City goalkeeper, and a bit of a head the ball really. Bill Lacey from Shells, the oldest cap player ever. How old was he?
He's 41 when he's playing
41.
This game.
Any of you out there in your 40s, keep the dream alive, because
him and Stephen Cluxton keeping hope alive.
Absolutely, for us guys.
People in their late 30s or
40s. You know what I mean? Jack McCarthy, who's still there. Only 4 debutants in this team. So it's more of a settled side. William Glenn from Shamrock Rovers, Mick O'Brien from now playing with Norwich, who captains the side. There's more of a sense actually of teams playing or players from teams in other leagues now begin to seep themselves into the side. 4 of them are playing in England. McLaughlin from Fordson, Harry Duggan from Leeds, John Joe Flood, who gets the other goal for Shamrock Rovers, Jimmy Dunne from Sheffield United, Fred Harlcher, that's a great name, from Bodes, and Joseph Golding from Shamrock Rovers. Jimmy Dunne. Now, a number of years ago, when Jamie Vardy was banging him in for Leicester, there was great excitement about Jamie Vardy going to break a record, because I think he scored 11 goals in 11 games, or he scored in 11 consecutive games. He may have scored 2 in a number of them, but 11 games in a row he scored. And he was to break a record, which he didn't break. But the person who owns that record for consecutive games in which he scored
in the top flight in
England was Jimmy Dunne, who played for Sheffield United. And Jimmy Dunne used to get an amazing amount of goals.
So he scored in 12 consecutive games, but in those 12 consecutive games when he scored 18 goals. So that's a pretty good ratio.
This is a goal machine.
Yes.
Right. Now, who is Jimmy Dunne? Jimmy Dunne is from Ringsend. I'll tell you what I know about him, okay? And then you can tell me what you know about him. So my feeling is that Jimmy Dunne, there's a few Dunnes, a few brother or sister. Christy's one of them.
Yeah, and his older brother is very involved in the IRA, and that kind of is where he ends up.
And he's heavily influenced by his brother, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
And Jimmy was 15, and he's involved in the Civil War.
Yes.
On the anti-treaty side, and he's involved in trying to blow up some bridges.
Yeah, so it's called the Night of the Bridges, which the anti-treaty forces, their plan is to basically blow up a whole lot of bridges around Dublin and then kind of paralyse the city, stop goods getting in and out. But
not a bad plan.
Not a bad plan, but it gets leaked and it's a huge disaster for them, because dozens of anti-treaty members are arrested and interned.
In the Curragh. So he gets interned as a 15-year-old Republican, socialist as well. His socialism is very important to him. So he goes to England. He ends up via. Did he play for Rovers? Is he a Shamrock Rovers player?
He comes through at Rovers and he can't get into the first team. So he wins, I think, a Metropolitan Cup at Rovers. He wins a lot of stuff for the Rovers B team. He plays a few games for the first team in the Shield. But we're talking about the 4 Fs. We've talked about them before.
He can't break in.
Fulham, Farrell, Flood, who plays in this game, and
Fagan.
And Kruger Fagan. So he can't get into the
Can't break in. And this is a time, by the way, if you're a younger listener, there isn't this dynamic of coming on for the last 15 minutes. There aren't substitutes. So there's the first 11 played the full 90 minutes.
And there's no such thing as squad rotation or anything like that.
No. So if you're not going to get your in, you have to go somewhere where you might get a chance.
So he goes to the seaside. He goes to New Brighton, which, despite the name, is nowhere near original Brighton or Brighton and Hove. New Brighton is on Merseyside, and it is it's a resort kind of similar to maybe like somewhere like Southport or Blackpool.
Right.
And they're a very aspirational team, and they're trying to be. All these seaside resorts are trying to draw spectators. So Blackpool famously later on will sign Stanley Matthews as a way to bring visitors to the town because people want to see the great Stanley Matthews. And it's kind of this arms race almost for all these seaside towns. And New Brighton have a big pier and a tower and all this sort of stuff, and they want to have a football team as well. So they're in the 3rd Division North, but they have big plans, and they sign Jimmy Dunn, and he's an immediate success.
He scores like 30, mid-30s, 40 goals a season.
Yes, but there's a bit of a gap here. So New Brighton sign him, playing Division 3, ground great guns. So much so, he's signed for a couple £100. He has 1 season with them. He does really well. Sheffield United take a punt on him for I think about £600. But he has to bide his time. So Harry Johnson is the centre forward for Sheffield United. He's still the club's record goal scorer, and he's keeping Dunn out of the team. So Dunn is playing in the reserves for quite a bit of time. Now he's still doing well enough that he's actually capped before the FAI capped him, the IFA capped him, but he gets his chance, and in 2 games towards the end of the season he scores 3 goals in the 2 games. He's the starting goal striker then for the following season, and he scores 36 league goals that season. And he goes even better again the next year. He scores 41 league goals next season, 52 in all competitions.
This is when, by the way,
amazing
the
stuff.
pitches are a disaster. The goalkeeper can pick up a pass back. There's, it's a very
the centre halves aren't gentle with you.
No, the centre halves. You'd have to murder somebody to get sent off.
Yeah.
So it's an incredible goal scoring achievement, and this is the game he makes his debut. Now we'll talk about him again in future episodes when he stands up to Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
As Ireland captain. But his politics is very important to him still. It kind of sticks with him throughout his career.
Yes.
His republicanism, his socialism. Anyway, we're playing against Belgium in Brussels, and we win 3-1, and he gets 2 of the goals.
And he's 25 now and he's making his debut. We've tried to select him a few times, but Sheffield United won't release him. They didn't want to release him for the away game to Italy because obviously the team were gone for over a week.
Right.
So
he's suffering from the same thing as players would get because he's been selected for the 2 Irelands.
Yes, and they're reluctant to release him for 1, but definitely not 2.
Well, he's their big goal scoring man.
And just to say, Sheffield United are kind of on the wane. So Sheffield United have been a very strong side in the 20s.
He sounds like the Sammy Smothics of his day.
Yeah, well, but at a higher level as well.
At a higher level, yeah.
So Harry Johnson,
banging him in for a kind of a struggling side.
Yeah, Billy Gillespie is gone. Billy Gillespie at this stage, I think, is coaching up in Derry and changes their jerseys to red and white stripes. So they are a team in decline. They were a side that was winning FA Cups in the 20s, things like that. They're struggling towards the bottom of the league. So to score 36 league goals and 41 league goals for a struggling side,
it's a hell of an achievement. And
they're turning down offers from bigger clubs for him. So he's a very much in demand player.
But did you move around that much in that era? If you go to Sheffield United and you're settled and you have your accommodation sorted and you know what I mean, it's not as mobile a job as maybe it will be certainly.
But if you get a club chairman who decides they want to cash in on you have no choice. You're bought and sold like a racehorse sort of thing.
Right, but there's still the maximum wage.
There's still a maximum wage. So at his time, I think it's about £8 or £9.
So why would you? Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, you're talking about his politics as well. One of the things when he's at Sheffield, I mean. Think what's happening in this time, late 20s, early 30s. There's the Wall Street crash.
Okay, exactly, yeah.
Sheffield is a very industrial city.
The rise of fascism.
There's great footage of him basically playing and being involved in sports for unemployed men, playing charity matches for the unemployed. So he puts his money where his mouth is. He follows through on those convictions.
Okay.
And he's helping out with the unemployed in and around Sheffield and doing this kind of what we now call community outreach.
I hadn't figured actually the Wall Street crash of 29. Yeah, so it did have its impact.
Yeah.
Okay, and this game is played a month before the World Cup that Belgium are going to take a part in as one of only 4 European sides to participate. Ireland, the FAI were offered the opportunity, as they were actually in 1950, but we'll come back to that, but decided no.
And
Sounds like too much money.
Even though the Uruguayans are saying that they're going to contribute towards the cost of travel, because they understand that Uruguay is not an easy place to get to, and they are quite put out that only 4 nations travel. So it's France, obviously France being the home of FIFA, Jules Rimet, the trophy is named after, Yugoslavia, Romania and Belgium. Now, so think about it, the last game we had, it was almost a warm-up for the Belgians at the 28 Olympics, which we don't compete at for reasons we mentioned in the previous podcast.
Yeah.
This is a warm-up for their World Cup journey, so they're about to literally get a boat the following month. They've hired a new coach, a guy called Hector Goetink.
They have a new coach, yeah.
And the vice president of FIFA is a Belgian guy as well, the wonderful name Rudolf William Seeldraers. So
it would have been important for Belgium to go to this tournament and to give it its...
This is FIFA's big new tournament. They want to make sure that, if you're a big FIFA official, you want to make sure that your nation is going to compete and give this World Cup thing a good start.
So previously, in the 1920, they won the gold medal in controversial circumstances because of a walk-off in the final from the opposition team, the Czechoslovakians. 24 is officially a FIFA designated World Championship, if you might like to say that, under the umbrella of Olympics. 28 the same, but this is FIFA's big move to have a competition that almost rivals the Olympics.
And if you think what's happened in that, say 6 years since that 24 Olympics, more and more countries are beginning to pay players. Professionalism is becoming a bigger thing. It's becoming more dominant in leagues, not only in Europe but also in North and South America. So they do need to have their own tournament that isn't controlled by, like, say, the Olympic rules. So
the Belgians kind of fancy themselves a little bit. I mean, they have this sort of...
They're on a good run of form. They're unbeaten under their new manager.
Right, so they went through 6 games losing streak, or when they couldn't win a game before Ireland played them 2 years previously.
And then we beat them, so obviously 7 games at least.
But in their own heads, they're big wigs of the international game, right? Okay, they have the vice president of FIFA, they won the gold medal in 1920, they're going to the World Cup, they consider themselves to be major international football players.
I think so.
Players on the international football scene.
The only thing I think is that maybe because they would have probably encountered Uruguay in the different Olympics in both Amsterdam and in Paris, and it's been held in Uruguay, you probably say Uruguay, people know about them now, they're maybe the favourites, and that the fact you don't have some of the more established nations like, say, England or Scotland competing, who people at this stage still look to as kind of the exemplars of the game.
Yeah.
But I think they feel like they're going to be there or thereabouts.
Okay. It's effectively the same team that plays in the World Cup. They don't do well in that World Cup.
No.
They lose both games to America and Uruguay. Right, okay. But still, again, Ireland, a 3-1 win away from home in front of 18,000 supporters. So that's again, this run of results from Ireland. It's pretty impressive. I mean, I know they only play once a year, but they beat them 4-2 in 28. They beat them 4-0 at home in 29, and they beat them 3-1 away in Brussels. You'd be wondering why Ireland didn't maybe have a punt and participate in this World Cup. It might have actually, if they had have, given a different sense of ourselves as a footballing nation in the 60 years after this, that we couldn't always say we never qualify for anything, we never appeared in a major championships. It does affect the sort of national psyche when it comes to football. There's a feeling of failure that we're not at the top table. We're an also ran team, but even if they had participated, we probably would know more about these players, because there'd be more interest in them. But because they're reduced to a couple of friendlies in around that period, we don't know who they are.
Exactly.
We're not as well. These players aren't as well known in Irish minds, and the likes of Jimmy Dunn are for many people largely forgotten, which is a tragedy.
Look at Jimmy Dunn, right? This guy scores, 36, 41, high 30s again the following season. He's bought by Arsenal, so Herbert Chapman, the great manager of Arsenal, pays a fortune to get him there. He wins the league title with Arsenal. Now, unfortunately, Herbert Chapman then suddenly dies, shocks kind of the football world, and then Dunn comes into the competition with a guy called Ted Drake, who's the England kind of centre forward at the time. He ends up moving to Southampton, and then ultimately he comes back and he's a player coach at Shamrock Rovers. But if you look, when he was able to play for Ireland, because obviously many of his clubs like Arsenal and Sheffield United wouldn't release him for many times, he makes 15 appearances for Ireland, he scores 13 goals. That's unbelievable. A goal scoring record that compares better than Robbie Keane in terms of goals per game ratio. It's far fewer games.
And he didn't cost the FAI 250 grand.
He did not. And he's called Snowy Dunn because he's a kind of shock of blonde hair.
I love all these nicknames.
Yeah, Snowy Dunn. But also, I spoke to a couple of people who actually saw him play. So I remember I spoke to Con Murphy's father before he passed away a couple of years ago.
You saw him play?
Who saw, and two players he actually raved about, and they're both playing this game, Jimmy Dunn and Fred Horlicher.
From Bowes.
And he said Dunn is not a huge guy. He's 5'10", so he's tall enough by standards of the day.
These are all classic dubs. And dubs are never over 5'6".
Yes, and again a good rings end man as we know. Yeah. But he's incredibly prolific in the air. He's a great header of the ball. But then if you go back and you read some, like a very cerebral guy. If you read some of his interviews when he's playing for Arsenal, he's talking about what Matthias Sindelar is doing, playing for Austria, and this whole inverted deep line centre forward thing. He's very aware of this sort of stuff.
Really? So he thinks about the game a lot.
He really. Here's one for you. He's Rovers. He does an interesting. He's player coach for Rovers. He has a falling out with the Cunningham family who own Rovers later in his career, and he moves to Bowes as their coach. Has some success at Bohemians, and then eventually goes back to Shamrock Rovers.
We need a tribute jersey to him then, as Bowes fans.
But he passes away very suddenly. I think he dies when he's only 43, and what he's done that day is. Sweden are playing Ireland, so he's gone down to meet George Rayner, who's a Sweden manager, and watch the Swedes train because he wants to learn from them. So he's a very cerebral guy. It's a terrible pity he died so young because he could have been a very progressive force in Irish football. A really, really interesting.
He could have been a manager later in the year.
Because he has great success as both Rovers and Bowes as a manager, as a head coach, and a fascinating guy. But.
And famously, I mean, we'll talk about this again, but when Ireland are playing Germany in Bremen in 1939, before the breakout of the World War II, there's a Nazi salute. The players are instructed to do it, and he rebels and he screams as captain, screams down the team who are half embarrassed, half bemused, but their arms in the air, and he's screaming at them. Remember 1916. Remember the Battle of Ockram.
Yeah.
Hard to interpret what his motivation was. It was possibly because don't do this German thing, be more Irish, rather than understanding the poisonous nature of what that salute represented. But he was
although I think he maybe knew what it, because
he had a sense of it.
He did, and I think talking about his kind of his social outlook. I mean, when he's coming back from that game in Bremen. They stop off in Southampton, which is obviously a port city on the south coast of England, and he's obviously successful at Southampton. He saved them from relegation. His goals keep them up, and the dockers of Southampton give him a salute. So that's kind of the sort of the milieu in which he's moving, and obviously he's from Ringsend. It's a very working class community,
right?
So and again another guy going back to our topic of the GA. He doesn't start playing soccer until he's interned. He's playing for a team called Isles of the Sea, who are a team based in around Ringsend. And it's only when he's in the small confines of what's called the Tin Town camp, because guys are living in basically tin shacks in the Curragh. And they're not giving them sticks to play hurling, because not a good idea to give a lot of young men a whole lot of sticks to play hurling. They don't have space to play Gaelic football, so they're playing small-sided games in the camp, and they're playing soccer, and that's when he becomes a soccer player. So it's really only his internment that leads to him being a soccer player. So
it's a bit like Val Harris, originally a kind of a Gaelic footballer, probably organised in that part of the world, and then he turns to soccer when, I don't know, circumstances allow.
And then he comes out, obviously he's recruited into Shamrock Rovers as a young man. Doesn't quite make it there and then, but obviously that's the first stepping stone into this amazing professional career. One other guy, I just do want to mention the other guy who makes his debut there, Fred Horlicher. So again, it's an unusual name. So Alfred Friedrich Horlicher is from Blackrock.
It sounds like he has some German background.
His parents are both German, so
right.
And it's interesting as well. They have a butcher shop, pork butchers, and his father's shop is actually vandalised in kind of anti-German, outbursts of anti-German sentiment during the First World War.
Right.
But his father and mother may have left possibly because of religious persecution, because they're actually Mormons. And Horlicher actually takes a year out in the 1930s from his football career because as a Mormon you're required by your religion to go out and spend a year proselytizing, and he goes door to door around Nottinghamshire proselytizing for the Mormon Church, and he gets offered a contract by Notts County, but he's a strict amateur, and he's a fascinating guy. He's a butcher, so he's big, strong sort of guy. He also plays water polo. He's a swimmer, so he's a very physical, athletic guy.
Not the first international to have left their home country to come to Ireland because of religious persecution. Louis Buckman, as we know, left Lithuania because of anti-Semitism. His family arrived here. He goes on and plays for Ireland in the 1914 team. And the Hurricanes, as you say, left Germany possibly.
They certainly might have helped here.
Yeah, it helped in their decision making that Mormons were having a rough time in where they were from.
Yeah, now he is born in Ireland, I should say. So he was born in Blackrock. And again, another guy who much like Jimmy Dunn, kind of very suddenly dies in his late 30s. He's basically retired.
It's so tragic. I mean, these players like we talk about Paddy Moore again, who plays in the 30s as well. Dies so young.
Yeah,
and therefore that's possibly why their legacy is not as well known, because they didn't live to later years.
They're not being interviewed when TV comes around in the 60s and 70s.
Their kids don't know them as well. Their grandkids certainly don't know them. Yeah.
Like for many years he was Bow's second highest goal scorer after Turlough O'Connor, so he scored 85 league goals, despite playing a lot of his career actually in a defensive role, because he's a multi-talented player. He starts off as an inside forward.
Is O'Connor still the highest goal scorer?
No, it's been broken by Glenn Crowe.
Oh, has it? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
League goal scorer.
Right.
But yeah, just a fascinating guy, and we'll come on to it in an upcoming game. But he's also Ireland's first substitute. He comes on as a sub in a game against the Netherlands for his club teammate Billy Jordan.
Was there not somebody who was knocked out and got replaced in the game against Italy, or am I imagining that? Maybe I'm imagining that. Okay, so as we reach the end of this sort of decade, if you like, this is the 1930s. What are we facing into now? We're facing into a lot of turbulence. We're facing into a lot of upheaval across Europe, and we're now facing into much more organised international football. We're not in the sort of the outskirts, if you like, of international football. There's competitions now that we can try and fit into, which is the World Cup. So the 1930 World Cup, 1934 World Cup, we begin to play competitive games. So it's actually something to energise the Irish football public, and that probably cements maybe some of the celebrity around this Irish football team. I know I've spoken before that, but I am really interested in the fact that these are basically one game a year if you're lucky. Yeah. And if it is one game a year, it's not always in Dublin. So the next game, as I said, is going to be that they play in Dublin is 1934. So it's just getting used to this idea of this Irish team and who they are and what they're trying to achieve. Because for the last 10 years, it's been a bunch of friendlies.
Exactly, and we've often talked about the home nations and missing out on those games against England and Scotland and Wales.
Because the Olympics is gone, right? Because we're not participating, or we're not interested.
Yes.
Or the World Cup was taken over from the Olympics. So the 24 team that was trying to win something was involved in that competitive competition. 28 we're not involved.
We don't actually send a football team to the Olympics till 1948.
Right. Okay. So you know what I mean. That essential component of football, which is the competitive edge, which the IFA still have. Yeah. We don't.
But we have the World Cup. The first World Cup is invitational, but the second one you have to qualify, and there's qualifying groups, and there's kind of the emergence of what we would still recognise today as a qualifying campaign.
And we have to play Belgium.
What are the odds?
Okay, well I think we've come to the end of our trilogy of Belgian games. Really interesting. We got to talk about Tom Farquharson, which is a real delight. We got to talk about Jimmy Dunn, which is a real delight. And we uncovered the fact that there is a Kerry inter-county footballer with a Munster Championship medal, Mr. Birmingham, whose grandson spoke to us, who also is a senior international player. Now, the next two episodes are about playing Spain. Before they don't realise it then, but the Civil War is on its way in 5 years' time. Again, a Catholic country, if you like. And we play against Spain in 1930, twice in 1931, once in Barcelona and once in Spain. But what's interesting is actually we finally get an absolute hiding.
Yeah. And look, I think the next
5-0 at home.
The next game I think is probably Tom Farquharson's greatest game in an Irish jersey. The The following one, maybe not so much.
Yeah, and it's actually when Tom Farquharson and Sam Robinson actually share the same team as, I think, I may have that wrong, but I thought I did. Yeah, Tom Farquharson and Sam Robinson, both IRA men, both on the team together. And I think we have the debut of a Mr. Paddy Moore, who, again, Ballybock man from around the corner of Croke Park, and he begins to break records as well. And of course, he unfortunately goes and dies early as well. But that's next week. Ireland-Spain, 1931. We hope you've enjoyed our last 3 episodes of games against Belgium.
The Belgian cycle, the Belgian trilogy.
The Troika. the Belgian trilogy, yeah. 28, 29 and 1930. And next week we're going to 1931. And we have 2 episodes on 2 games against Spain. But for now, thank you very much for listening to our latest episode of Each Game on Its Merits.